You know what surprises me the most? Many people spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars trying to make their garden look beautiful and welcoming, but in the end, it still feels empty because they miss the simplest ideas that cost almost nothing. I made exactly the same mistake for years, and every spring I bought another decoration from the garden store, hoping this time my yard would finally have that warm feeling I admired in other people's gardens. The truth was that I was overlooking things I already had at home, and once I understood that, everything started to change. I want to share those ideas with you because they are simple, they are inexpensive, and they really make people stop and smile when they visit. I am not a designer, and I never tried to impress anyone. I just wanted my little piece of land to feel comfortable after many years of work, and I discovered that the best decorations are often the ones made by your own hands. Many years ago, an old neighbor told me something I never forgot. He said, "Never throw away a thing before asking yourself if it can make your garden happier." At first I laughed because it sounded funny, but after a while, I realized he was right. An old wooden ladder became a flower stand. A cracked watering can became one of the nicest decorations near my porch. Even broken bricks that most people would haul away found a second life along my garden paths. Very few people do this today because they think a beautiful garden must be expensive, but that is where most people make their first mistake. A garden should tell your story instead of showing how much money you spent. When I walk outside early in the morning with a cup of tea, I enjoy looking at these simple things because each one reminds me that I built it myself, without rushing and without spending much. That feeling cannot be bought in any store. During this video, I will show you several old methods that many people have forgotten, and every one of them can be done with inexpensive materials or things you probably already have. Some of these ideas surprised even my family because they looked much better than anyone expected, and one simple project completely changed the way visitors see my vegetable garden. That is the one I always save until a little later, because there is one small detail that almost everyone gets wrong. The first time, many years ago, I also believed that the easiest way to improve the garden was to buy another decoration from the store, because that is exactly what advertisements try to convince us to do. After a while, I noticed something interesting. Those expensive decorations never stayed in one place for very long because they did not really belong there. I would move them from one corner to another, hoping they would suddenly look better, but they never did. Then, one afternoon, while cleaning my old shed, I found several wooden fruit crates that had been sitting there for years. Most people would probably burn them or throw them away, but I remembered what my neighbor once told me, and I decided to try something different. I cleaned the wood with a brush without making it look perfect because I actually like a little natural wear. Then I stacked the crates at different heights near the entrance to my vegetable garden and placed flower pots inside them. The result surprised even me, because the whole area suddenly looked warmer and more welcoming. The best part was that it cost almost nothing. That day I understood that people notice harmony much more than expensive things. Most people make a mistake right here because they try to decorate every empty space at once. I learned that it is much better to improve one small corner and then simply stand back and look at it for a day or two. Your eyes will tell you what is missing much better than any magazine ever could. Another old method that very few people use today is combining flowers with vegetables instead of separating everything into perfect sections. Years ago, an elderly gardener showed me how a few bright flowers placed between rows of vegetables could completely change the feeling of the whole garden. Visitors stopped talking only about tomatoes or cucumbers and started saying how pleasant the entire place looked. That little trick costs almost nothing, because many flowers grow easily from inexpensive seeds, and some even come back year after year. I also like using old metal buckets with small holes in the bottom instead of throwing them away. After a little cleaning and a coat of simple paint, they become beautiful planters that fit almost anywhere. Every time someone asks where I bought them, I smile because they expect an expensive answer, but the truth is much simpler. There is another forgotten idea that changed one quiet corner of my garden more than all these projects together, and it started with something that most families already have hidden in the garage, collecting dust. One of the best discoveries I ever made happened almost by accident when I was cleaning the garage one rainy afternoon. Hidden behind a pile of old boards was an old wooden wheelbarrow that had not been used for many years. The wheel was bent, and one handle had a crack in it, so it was no longer useful for heavy work. My first thought was to cut it up for firewood, but then I remembered another old gardener who once told me that almost every worn-out tool deserves one last good job before it disappears. I cleaned the dirt from the wood without trying to make it look new because old wood has its own character that fresh paint often hides. I placed the wheelbarrow near the corner of my garden where the fence looked plain and empty. Then I filled it with good soil and planted simple flowers that bloom for a long time without much care. When everything started growing, it looked as if that old wheelbarrow had always belonged there. Visitors noticed it before they noticed anything else, and many of them asked where they could buy one just like it. They were surprised when I told them it had been sitting in my garage for years waiting for a second chance. That taught me another valuable lesson. Most people think decoration begins with shopping, but very often it begins with looking carefully at what you already own. Very few people take the time to do that anymore because it feels too simple. Another mistake I often see is placing every decoration at the same height. When everything sits on the ground, the eye quickly gets bored. Many years ago, someone showed me how using different levels makes even a small garden feel larger. I started placing flower pots on old tree stumps or short wooden blocks that would normally be thrown away. Some pots stayed low while others stood a little higher, and suddenly the whole area looked much more interesting without adding anything expensive. I also like using large, smooth stones collected over the years instead of buying fancy borders from the garden center. A few carefully placed stones around flowers or along a small path create a natural look that never goes out of style. They require almost no maintenance, and every season they seem to fit the garden even better. There is one forgotten trick that brings all these simple decorations together and gives the entire garden a warm, welcoming feeling, both during the day and after sunset. Most people completely overlook this detail, but once I started using it, my garden changed in a way I never expected. The little detail I mentioned is light, and I do not mean expensive electric lighting or complicated systems that take an entire weekend to install. I am talking about soft, simple light that makes the garden feel warm when the sun begins to go down. Many people spend all their time making the garden look nice during the day but forget that in the evening everything changes. I learned this from an older gentleman many years ago when we were sitting outside after finishing work in the garden. As the sun disappeared, he lit a few simple solar lanterns and placed them between flower beds and near a small wooden bench. Suddenly, the whole garden felt calm and inviting, even though nothing else had changed. That moment stayed with me, and later I began using the same idea around my own yard. The nice thing is that you do not need to buy expensive lights because even inexpensive solar lamps can create a beautiful effect if you place them carefully. Most people make the mistake of putting them in straight lines like a sidewalk. I tried that once and it looked stiff and unnatural. Now I place them where the eye naturally wants to travel. One near a flower bed. Another beside an old watering can filled with flowers. One close to the entrance of the vegetable garden. Instead of drawing attention to the lamps themselves, they quietly highlight the decorations you already made with your own hands. There is another forgotten method that costs almost nothing and works wonderfully with evening light. I started hanging old glass jars from simple metal hooks or low tree branches. Inside each jar, I placed a small solar candle or a battery light. During the day, the jars are almost invisible, but in the evening, they give off a soft glow that makes the entire space feel peaceful. Friends often think they came from an expensive garden center, but in reality they were ordinary jars that once held pickles or jam. That is another reason I rarely rush to throw anything away because many simple objects only need a different purpose. I also notice that decorations look much better when they are surrounded by healthy plants instead of being crowded together. Less is often more, and that is something many people forget. If every corner is filled with ornaments, nothing really stands out. Give each project a little room and let nature finish the picture for you. There is still one project I enjoy more than any other, because it brings color personality and a feeling of welcome right at the entrance to the garden, and almost everyone who visits asks me how I made it. There is one decoration that always makes me smile because it proves that the entrance to a garden does not need to be large or expensive to leave a good impression. Many years ago, I had an old wooden gate that looked tired and ordinary. Replacing it would have cost quite a bit of money, and to be honest, it was still strong enough to last for many more years. Instead of buying a new one, I decided to give it a different look using only simple materials I already had. I cleaned the wood with a stiff brush and added a fresh coat of natural-colored stain instead of bright paint. Then I attached 2 handmade flower boxes that I built from leftover boards. The boards were not perfect, and some even had small marks from old nails, but after a little sanding, they looked just right. I planted easy flowers that bloom for a long season and do not ask for much attention. The first time everything came into bloom, the entrance looked completely different. It felt warm and welcoming before anyone even stepped inside. That is something many people forget. The first few steps into the garden create the first impression, and they do not have to cost much at all. Another forgotten trick I still use is placing an old wooden chair near the entrance instead of throwing it away. Most people would think a broken chair has no value, but if it is still stable, it can become a beautiful stand for flowers. I removed the damaged seat and placed a flower pot inside the opening. Soon, the flowers were growing through the chair, and it became one of the most photographed corners of my yard. Very few people expect something so ordinary to look that attractive. I have learned that gardens become memorable when they contain little surprises instead of expensive decorations that everyone has already seen in stores. Another mistake people often make is trying to finish everything in one weekend. I never do that anymore. I complete one small project, and then I simply enjoy it for a while before starting another. That keeps the work pleasant instead of tiring, and it also gives me new ideas that I would never notice if I rushed. Sometimes I sit with a cup of tea and quietly look around before deciding what to improve next. Those peaceful moments often lead to the best ideas of all. There is still one final method that brings everything together and gives the whole garden a finished look without spending much money, and it is probably the easiest project I have ever made. Over the years, I discovered that the easiest way to make the whole garden feel complete is not by adding one large decoration, but by connecting everything together with simple paths and natural borders. This is one of those old methods that many people used years ago because materials were expensive and nothing was wasted. I still follow that idea today because it works just as well now as it did back then. Instead of buying costly edging from the garden center, I use old bricks that friends no longer need, or stones that I have collected little by little over the years. I never try to make every line perfectly straight because nature is not perfectly straight either. A gentle curve through the garden feels much softer and invites you to keep walking. It is surprising how such a small change can make the whole place seem larger than it really is. Many people make the mistake of decorating every corner while forgetting the spaces that connect those corners together. The paths deserve just as much attention as the flower beds, because they guide your eyes through the garden. Another little secret someone showed me many years ago was to leave one quiet corner almost untouched. At first, I did not understand why, because I thought every space should be filled with something interesting. Then I tried it. I placed a simple wooden bench under a small tree with one flower pot beside it, and nothing more. That quiet corner became my favorite place on the entire property. Sometimes less decoration gives you more peace. Visitors often choose to sit there without anyone suggesting it, because the area feels calm and natural. I also enjoy adding small handmade signs made from leftover pieces of wood. They do not have to be perfect. A simple name for a flower bed or a welcome message near the entrance gives the garden a personal touch that no expensive ornament can replace. Children especially enjoy looking for these little details as they walk around. The wonderful thing about all these ideas is that they can be done little by little without putting pressure on your budget. If you finish only one project this month, that is already progress. Next month, you can add another. Before long, your garden begins to reflect your own hands and your own memories instead of looking like a page from a catalog. There is still one last thought I always keep in mind whenever I change something outside, and once I understood it, I stopped worrying about making everything perfect, because that simple idea changed the way I looked at my garden forever. The biggest lesson I have learned after all these years is that a beautiful garden is never finished, and that is exactly why I enjoy spending time in it. Every season gives me another chance to improve one small corner without rushing or spending more money than necessary. I no longer compare my garden with pictures in magazines because those places often look perfect for a photograph, but they do not always feel warm or personal. I would rather have a simple yard filled with handmade ideas that remind me of good memories and useful old methods than a place full of expensive decorations with no story behind them. If there is one piece of advice I would like to leave with you, it is this. Before you throw something away, stop for a moment and ask yourself whether it could become part of your garden. An old bucket may become a planter. A wooden crate may become a flower shelf. A worn chair may become the most interesting decoration in the yard. Even a few stones or leftover bricks can help create a path that makes your garden feel welcoming. Most people overlook these simple opportunities because they are searching for complicated solutions, while the best ideas are often sitting right in front of them. I still remember how proud I felt when neighbors began asking where I had bought certain decorations, and I could honestly tell them I had made them myself, using things that would otherwise have ended up in the trash. That feeling is worth much more than spending a lot of money. Another reason I enjoy these small projects is that they never have to be completed in one day. You can work for an hour in the morning, then enjoy the results with a cup of tea in the afternoon. Little by little, your garden changes, and each improvement encourages you to try another. That is how beautiful places are created over time. They grow together with the people who care for them. I hope at least one of these old ideas inspires you to look around your own yard with different eyes, because you may already have everything you need to create something special. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I hope the next time you walk into your garden, you notice one forgotten object that is ready for a second life, because I still have one more favorite idea waiting for another day, and I think you will enjoy that one just as much.